Hi.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Kathleen O'Brien, and I'm a board member of the Community Arts of Bellevue. And I welcome you here tonight for a very special program that we've got scheduled with two members of Nashville Repertory Theater's amazing, and I mean amazing, creative team, Gary Hoff and Lori Gann-Smith. And they're going to give us an inside peek into their world on how they go about designing a show. We're talking about sets, props, costumes, the whole shebang. They just, I told Gary years ago, if I could marry someone other than the man I am married to, Tim, who I love and adore, to help me design a home, it would be Gary Hoff. He's just absolutely amazing. So we also have another special guest here, and we're going to put a cherry on the top of all of this with Nate Eppler. He's going to lead the discussion and the conversation that we have with Gary and Lori. I think a lot of you around Nashville know who Nate is, but if you don't, he's a playwright and a new play advocate, currently serving as the director of the Ingram New Works Project and Playwright-in-Residence for Nashville Repertory Theatre. He is so talented that they asked him to stay around. He's just brilliant. So without further ado, please welcome Nate Eppler. Nate, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. And I just want to say thank you to the Community Arts of Bellevue for inviting us out tonight to have this conversation. I'm very excited to get a chance to talk to both of these designers tonight and all of you. A little bit about our special guests. Lori Gann-Smith is the resident costume designer for Repertory Theatre. She holds her MFA in costume design from the University of Georgia and a BS in speech and theater from Middle Tennessee State University. In addition to her work for the Rep, she does freelance costume design for other theater companies and for film. She's also a visual artist, mom of twin daughters, and wife of filmmaker David S. Smith. You can see her work at lorigannsmith.com and on Instagram at zippyartist. Gary Hoff is now designing his 21st season for Nashville Repertory Theatre. Gary's designed hundreds of productions for Nashville Rep over his 20 plus years as head of design and our resident scenic designer. His designs range from small intimate productions to large-scale musicals. In addition to designing for Nashville Rep, he's designed for Nashville Children's Theater, designed for Nashville Shakespeare Festival, for the Tennessee Shakespeare Festival, and for Dollywood Theme Park. And you better believe I'm going to ask about that. He was included as one of the 6 virtuoso designers in American Theater Magazine, and he was a recipient of the Ingram Individual Artist Fellowship in Theatrical Scenic Design from the Tennessee Arts Commission. He holds his MFA in Scenic Design from Purdue and a BFA in Technical Theater from Central Michigan University. Besides being extraordinarily well-educated and extraordinarily talented, they're both really remarkable coworkers. I'm so proud to work with them all the time, and I'm glad to introduce them a little bit to you. How are we doing tonight? We doing okay?
Yeah. Doing well. Doing well.
Good. Thank you, Nate. You make it sound really great.
You're both very impressive.
You make it sound so good.
You know, it's a very strange time for theatrical production and design right now. The COVID pandemic has changed the way we go about doing work, the way that we're able to make work, and most importantly, hit us right where we live. We can't get together and see plays, right? Like one of my favorite things is sitting in the dark at the moment when the lights come up and the whole world is suddenly like you landed on a brand new planet. And both of you are responsible for those moments, and I would love to talk about them and how that work has changed and what we've been working on since the pandemic started. But I think I would like to start a lot smaller than that. So I'm a playwright, and I would like to ask you, what exactly is your job? So I don't know really what designers do. I mean, like by the time we have a meeting, you guys already have drawings and everything else. So Lori, why don't you start?
Okay.
What exactly is your job? What does a costume designer do? How do you describe it?
It's magic. I mean, I'll just be upfront. No, it's, you know, it's funny because when I tell people I'm a costume designer, they're always like, that's fun. And it is fun sometimes, but sometimes it's really a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
Actually, most of the time. So as a costume designer, I am responsible ultimately for everything that anyone on stage wears or carries or uses in sort of a costumish way, like a purse or something like that. So, and how we get there, first of all, like starts with the script. So you as a playwright should understand that. We want to go to the text first, and Gary can probably chime in. We read the script many times. Usually I read the script first just to get familiar with the story, with the pacing of what's going on, with sort of the beats of the play and the divisions in it. And then I go back and read it several times, looking specifically for costume clues, like someone's got to carry a letter in and produce it. So they would need a pocket probably, or a purse, or whatever would be appropriate for that. So,
so you're responsible for imagining, designing, and then physically constructing anything having to do with something that somebody wears, or like a hand prop or something like that, right?
Absolutely, yes.
And
yes.
that includes stuff like not only like imagining it, but also budgeting it and managing a bunch of other people to make that happen.
Yeah, because we wear lots of hats at Nashville Rep, as we all know. And so I'm not only the resident costume designer, but I run the shop as well. So.
Got it. And I definitely want to talk a little bit about, like where the creative process starts, but I want to make sure we give Gary a chance to answer this question too. Yeah. So what is the job of a resident scenic designer? Like, what does that even mean to be a resident scenic designer?
Basically, I'm creating the world that the play happens in. So I create the physical space that a show takes place in. I like Lori, I usually read a script once for, it's really important for me to be able to kind of get the feel of a show, because that's really what I'm conveying to the audience, because what they see first off coming into the theater is my work, usually. They don't see the costumes and the actors until the show actually starts, but it's kind of hard unless there's a curtain to hide the set. So the set has to really set the mood. So I really read it for the first time, just kind of figure out, what do I think the mood of the show is? And then I read it again, and then I do what I call a technical analysis, which is where I go through and I pick out every technical aspect that is written in the script. Absolutely everything. I don't deal as much as Lori does with costuming, unless it's something that the costumes have something to do with the set, as is, they hang something on a coat hook. They put something in the closet. Well, all of a sudden, that is something I need to know about, and it's something I need to talk to Lori about, or the props person who I work very closely with talks to Lori about, to make sure that we know what that is. Because there are some things.
Yeah, so your job is like a physical interpretation of some of the intangibles in the play, some of the like world of the play, and also you build the playground that the actors have to work in every element that they put their hands on, one way or the other.
Exactly. Yes. And I choose the furniture, the drapes, the china, you name it. I have to choose it. So so it all work together.
And how did you get into, what made you want to become a designer? I mean, like, were you a kid who liked to build furniture? Were you an engineer type?
I was always an artistic kid. Yeah, I was always an artistic kid, but I never, ever thought I'd go into theater. I come from a really small town in Michigan called Marlack, which is in the middle of the thumb, in the middle of rural farm country. So theater was not an option. That was not something my parents could even wrap their head around. But I always did theater, and I always enjoyed theater, and so I started as an actor, and I did a lot of shows at home.
Were you any good?
I was excellent. Oh my gosh! Yeah. Oh yeah. My Pirate King in Penzance was so good. But then I went to college, and I got into a couple shows because it was just fun. I was going to be a commercial artist. And one of my friends was in the BFA program. He goes, "Oh man, you know what? You should really be doing this." And I'm like, "Okay." So that's how it started. And I never, even at the end of undergrad, I didn't know that I was going to be going into scenic design. I actually thought I was going to be a stage manager.
Oh, really? And how long had you been working in scenic design by the time you came to Middle Tennessee?
I had did an internship at the Kalamazoo Civic Players for a season and a half, which is amazing civic theater in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And then I went straight from there and got the resident design position in Chattanooga at the Chattanooga. It was the Chattanooga Little Theater then. It's the Chattanooga Theater Center now. And then I went to grad school, and then I came here, and I've been here ever since.
I'd love to ask Lori the same question about how she got here. Matt, have we lost Lori? Are we trying to get her back?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
I'm going to try to come through with my phone because something is wrong with my iPad.
Oh, gosh.
So
oh, no.
While you're trying to connect, we got a question from Kathleen. She wants to know what you do with the sets after the show closes. I think she's got her eye on a piece in particular.
Sadly, a lot of it goes into the dumpster. I hate to say that. We have very limited storage. So if it's not something we think we can use again, it either goes, we try as much as possible to give it away, but that's not always possible. So unfortunately, some of our dumpsters look pretty spectacular at times.
Yay!
Welcome back, Lori.
Sorry about that. I don't know.
No, it's just fine. I'm so glad to see your smiling face. Now, I spent all this time talking about Gary Hoff's exciting origin story. Did you know he played the Pirate King? That is real. He did that. That is true.
That is impressive.
I do.
He was saying that he came to that it was unexpected for him to come to design, and I wonder, what your history as a designer was. Did you always want to be a designer? I mean, were you working in some other kind of design? Were you interested in costumes or fashion as a kid?
So I caught the bug in high school. I had a lovely, amazing teacher whose name was Juliet Guthrie. And she was teaching high school in Gallatin, Tennessee. She went to Vassar undergraduate and Yale School of Drama, and was, very. She just loved to make us work hard, which was fantastic. Hang on, I think I've got some echo here. I'm going to try to get rid of it. I'm just like the technical difficulty person. So anyway, I was really excited, and I started out by acting in high school, and I loved it. And then I got to college, and I did 1 year at Ole Miss. And when I was at Ole Miss, they had a graduate program. So undergraduates didn't really get on stage as much if you were an actor because they had, an MFA acting program.
Right.
So I started to just participate in doing some technical theater and stuff, and I really liked it. So when I went to MTSU and finished my degree, I actually worked in the scene shop. I did scene design. I found out that I was really, really awful at lighting design. So I kind of put that aside. And I worked in the costume shop. And so I just really always loved clothes as a general rule. And I really love research, which, is just fascinating to me, like what people wore. And so when I got ready to go to graduate school, I was like, I think this is what I really want to focus on. So, So I came to it. I think sometimes a lot of technical theater people don't know about technical theater, right? They just go in because it's such a fantastic thing. Theater is such a fantastic collaborative art. And then they discover what they can do, besides act, right? And that's kind of what happened to me. So.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's true for so many people. One really inspiring teacher kind of draws them into the range of possibilities that are available. We often think about, like we see the actors and sort of talk about them immediately afterwards, but you're doing a whole lot of heavy lifting to help the actors get to the point where we can debate how they did that monologue. I definitely want to talk to both of you about one thing that I think is true for both of you is like the extraordinary intricacy in your designs. Like they're so intentional and purposeful and really thought out, and I'm excited to kind of talk through some of that. But I would like to know what you're working on now. So, you know, Lori, like we're not putting costumes on actors right now. So what have you been working on since we've been in, you know, our temporary extended intermission?
Well, I was sort of put in charge of doing some educational work because I have a lot of background as a teacher. And so we are right now trying to support performing arts and STEAM teachers in metro schools by doing some videos and how-tos and integrated lessons with theater and science and math and things like that. So yeah, and I'm really enjoying it. I've learned how to edit video, which is a new skill for me. I don't know how I'm going to work that into the costume thing, but I'm going to find a way. So.
Well, there's some pretty great videos available on our YouTube and our socials. That's all Nashville Repertory Theatre on Facebook and on YouTube, and at Nash Rep on Twitter and Instagram. And you've already started the process. There's scenic texture videos and costume construction video, makeup and costume construction videos coming up soon.
Those are coming up. Yeah, they're coming up to be uploaded right now. We have one on how to make your own dress form. So
how to make your own dress form. Oh, see, this is perfect.
Exactly.
For everybody that has opened, you know, they opened up a pandemic Etsy shop, you need a dress form.
Exactly.
For your, you know, whatever Halloween costume gear you got. Again, our socials are Nashville Repertory Theatre at YouTube and on Facebook, and at Nash Rep right there in the bar on Twitter and Instagram. Okay, so what we're really here to talk about is the design process. So now we know a little bit about both of you, and neither one of you had any intention of being designers, it turns out, and suddenly have become designers. That's a huge responsibility. Like you said, you're both heads of these departments, you're managing a bunch of other people, but also, and I think, you know, Gary's description was so great, the first thing you see are these items, right? The set, the minute the lights come up, the costume that leads the actor and drags them on stage, right? And the stuff that you don't think about, the detail that it takes to put a pocket on something. So the, you know, the letter that makes the whole pinter play turn like comes out at the right moment. I love all that stuff. So I want to talk about the earliest steps in the design process. You both talked about reading and research. So we're going to talk through the process for the play Shakespeare in Love. So the rep decides to do Shakespeare in Love. I'm sure that they write it on a giant board, and all of a sudden the word Shakespeare in Love is there, and you both hear it. And you're doing Shakespeare in Love. And I want to know, like, I really mean this literally, what is the very first thing you do? Gary, when you hear the title, right, what is the very first step in the design process?
As we said, read the script, and then read the script. And then talk to the director, because the director is really leading the ship on these shows. So even if we understand the script, we need to know how the director sees the production. Their viewpoint is really the viewpoint of the show, and it's what we have to follow up with and back up in a physical way. So we have a really, you know, strong connection with the director. If we can all talk at once, it's great. If all the designs are together and you can hear what the director's saying, it's really, because it affects all of us. It affects what Lori does with costumes. It affects what I do. It affects what props does. It affects lighting and sound and the whole thing. And it's
analogous with, you know, like for those people that aren't theater people, is the director analogous to like your manager? Like, are they the person who's saying, okay, here's how we're going to use the assets we have. Like, we're going to focus on this one particular thing. Like, our pizzeria is going to be really good at delivery, so we're going to spend a lot of our assets on delivery. Is that how it works with the director? They're like, the most important thing in our production of you know, Shakespeare in Love is the magic bed, right? I mean, like, is that sort of what it's like? That they kind of,
it's kind of more, it's not as a specific thing. It's got kind of an overall vision for the production. You know, speaking about time period and the how they want to do it. They want the actors to act, and style wise, what they're thinking of style wise, because that affects us greatly of how the director sees it in a whole big picture. And then the small things come later.
Got it.
So the first thing is the big picture.
Is the big picture, sure. And is that true for the costume process as well? I mean, like, are you, are you doing parallel research along with the script? Like, is there period stuff that goes along with that? Is there budgetary stuff that goes along with that? What are the first steps on the costume side?
Absolutely. One of the first things that I look at, in addition to reading the script and starting to do research about clothes of the period, if it's a period piece, or, I mean, even doing research with contemporary pieces to see, what's in, what's out, what are the trends. But I also look at who's been cast and try to get the actors in for measurements very early on, and just sort of put a bug in their ear and talk a little bit with them about what they think about their characters, because they're going to be working with the director on character. And so I want to sort of mine that particular piece of it, because when I read through it, I may have a certain vision of that character, but they may be developing the character in a different way. And so I want to make sure that I take the actors' feelings and what they're doing, what the work that they're doing into consideration. So in addition to those sort of practical things.
Yeah. And I tell the actors they're there for scale.
For scale. One of my favorite things about I don't like working alone. Like I really like the collaborative process. A lot of my job is truly like typing by myself at weird hours, and I understand that. But I love like getting into meetings and working together on a project. Like a really good play is authored by a really big team, and it takes a really long time for everybody to get on the same page. So I'd love to talk a little bit about how those meetings work. So at what point, Gary, do you start bringing in drawings? And we have some. Maybe you can start, Matt. The very first one is I think a ground plan of Shakespeare in Love. Is that where you start?
And this is actually where I normally start, especially if I'm working with a director that I did in this case that I've worked with a number of times, because I can talk through physical movement on the stage with the director, and I find it's easier to do with a ground plan than it is with a sketch, because a sketch doesn't really tell you space, give you a sense of depth. So I always start with a ground plan. Now, if I've never worked with a director, I'll probably do a really rough sketch just to give them an idea of the overall look, but I'll still go back to the ground plan to give them an idea of space.
And then, after the ground plan, then you kind of do a rendering, right? Can you talk a little bit about what a rendering is? And Matt, I know we have a black and white a rendering of the Shakespeare in Love set. Yeah. So this is the next step, right? Like after we've all agreed on what the ground plan is. This
after a few meetings, and this is where I really show not only the director, but it's probably pretty close where I'm showing the other designers and the actors what their space is going to look like.
And we have one in color too.
Yes, and then I will do it in color, which gives you even a better idea of the kind of the feel for the production. But these happen a little later in the process. This is usually after things are pretty set, because renderings take forever for me. So it's not something I can do quickly and easily. So it's something that I want to make sure that I'm representing what we're going to do pretty specifically. So
this is a bunch of skills in action. This is like good communication skills. This is, getting to like a good collaboration skill, so good like interpersonal skills. This is obviously some engineering skills as you're doing like a floor plan, and then some drawing skills that you've added on top of that. So this is like a weird like overlay of stuff, like taking into account. By the time you get to the renderings, that's the picture that we just saw, a lot of those decisions have been made. You've had a lot of other conversations with other elements, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's pretty set, and it's really more to kind of give a visual representation for the director to deal with, and use in rehearsal.
And what's the first pen and paper spot for you? Do you start with costume sketches? Do you start with ideas clips for a director? Do you start with where does it start for you, and at what point do you start drawing on your own?
I'm sketching pretty quickly as I'm doing research. A lot of times I will if I'm doing research from books, then I'll sketch things out or make photocopies, of the things that I'm interested in, details, the volume of the clothing at that time, what kind of sleeves do they have, what types of materials were being used. And then I'm also at that point sort of shopping for fabrics, because probably I've talked to Gary about what kind of material look the set is going to have. So, and what colors we're thinking about, so that we can kind of collaborate on that in conjunction with the director. Of course, we're not just going off in a corner and then going to surprise them with what we have.
Right. Well, we're spending money and a lot of time on making it. So
but
we're
it's really important that we collaborate, because our color combinations need to work well with each other, and we need to decide what's going to be forward in the sight line and what's going to be behind. So, and I've seen productions that this has failed miserably when the costume designer and the scenic designer haven't collaborated, and the girl matches the sofa, and and they've done all this work, and so it's really absolutely necessary that we confer continually about those things.
So Lori, we've got some images. I would love for you to talk us through a little bit. I know the first one is an early sketch for Will. What are we looking at here?
So if you look there, I had a completely different idea for his doublet until I found that light blue material. And when I found that material, that really opened up the design possibilities for me. And so what you see sort of attached to that piece of paper are pieces of fabric, which we call swatches. And when I gather all that fabric together that I'm thinking about for the costumes, I would give pieces of that to Gary as the scene designer, and also to the lighting designer, so they know what kind of surfaces the costumes are going to have. Are they going to absorb light? Are they going to reflect light? What kind of things are going to happen? And also Gary, in the case of Shakespeare in Love, I knew that a lot of the set was going to be very dark. And so I wanted to make sure that I propped out the actors so that you could see them well. So I went with a lot of lighter colors. That is a little bit of artistic license for that period of time, but also we are recreating not only a time period, but a movie. And so I felt like we could take that license and run with it, because there's such, this whole show is steeped in Elizabethan sort of culture, but it's also just a love story, and most people, I would think, had seen the movie before they came to see the show, and so we didn't want to completely immerse them in a world that they didn't already know, but we also didn't want to just duplicate the movie, right? But we have to take all those things into consideration.
And I think Matt, you've got a few more photos of sketches and costumes, and maybe even a production photo of Will.
So I think what you're going to see here is I've tried to start doing my renderings digitally. I used to paint all of my renderings, but then if I change my mind, I have to repaint, right? So this is a production photo of Will, and then Fenneman and well, I knew I was going to forget his name. I forgot his name the whole time I was doing the production. But it's a lovely Jim Crawford, the actor, who is lovely to work with. So, and this was, I think, an audition scene in the show. Matt, do you have those short videos? Oh, okay. So there's a picture of the actual thing. And the shirt and everything that he wore in the, and we made those things in the costume shop. So, but yeah, so once, and there it is again. Once we get everything rendered out as designers, then I, as the shop manager, would assign different things to different people. Sometimes we pull things out of stock to use. So we keep all the costumes that we make and buy. And so we might pull things out of stock to use, like petticoats or tights, or even some dresses for some lesser players. not lesser players, but like people that aren't the main characters of the show. And then some things we will build from scratch. For this show, it's very interesting because we had to have corsets for everyone, and we had to have those. We actually had those built, and I think we have a picture of a corset in there too, one of the Elizabethan corsets. Because people usually think corset, but different corsets were different shapes in different time periods. So we had to have corsets that were not Victorian, didn't make an hourglass figure, but actually sort of straightened out the women, because that's an Elizabethan thing.
Mm-hmm. Matt, can we see any of those sketch videos, and maybe Lori can talk through it? I think there's one for Viola, and there's one for the nurse.
There's two for Viola, I think. So that was my rough sketch on the left-hand side that I started with, and the fabric swatches and things. And then there should be a video of that left-hand rendering. Yeah, so this is on a program called Procreate. Oh, that's weird. It didn't play the whole video. So, yeah, so I usually render now digitally on my iPad because it's a lot easier to change things. So if I decide on a different fabric than the one I had in mind at first, it's easy to go into a digital rendering and change that. But it's not so easy if you've painted it and you have to repaint it. So it cuts down on time.
Got it.
Yeah, I want to follow up with Lori's comment about period. What we aren't doing documentary. We're not trying to reproduce the period. What we're trying to do is create the atmosphere of the period, and the atmosphere that makes it work. So we can take a lot of artistic license of things that didn't actually happen, but work well for us in the production. So if people get upset about us not being absolutely historically correct, they're right, we're not, and we intend to be. We really are trying to create the atmosphere and the mood of that period. We're not creating a documentary, and we're certainly not recreating the movie.
Sure, sure. Listen, this is one of my favorite things about theater, like I said, is the totality of the world that you're walking into. And there's a bunch of things that you get to do that movies can't do. And that's like, you get to be right next to this three-dimensional universe. And that means it's wholly created. Matt, if we can, I would love to, towards the end of our slideshow, I think it's number, let's see here, 17, starting at 17, the Tilney sketch, and then the photo. We've got some sketches, and then right after that, the photo. So you can kind of see the sketch and then the on-stage version. If you wouldn't mind just running through a couple of those. So that's the design for the Queen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
yes, so
and then I think we've got, and I think we have a photo of that.
And that's actually a different dress. She had two dresses, so yeah. There's the rendering for that dress.
There's the rendering.
And these are painted, so these were not done digitally. I was kind of in my digital transition during Shakespeare in Love. So there she is again. And there she is in that dress. So the silver dress that was roughed.
It's just gorgeous. Yeah, that's really extraordinary. And being just a few feet away from that in the audience was pretty spectacular. Again, it's just like that level. Well, it's like I said, that like astounding level of detail. The sort of thing that you have to know that from far away you can get that it's royalty, right? That it's a queen. And the closer and closer you get, the less of a cartoon it is, and the more detailed and detailed and detailed it becomes, all the way down to helping the actor get into the space of suddenly becoming.
I'd like to say something about that, actually, Nate.
Sure.
You know, I said something about corsets. We would not try to fit a modern body into a real Elizabethan corset. So that's why we worked with the corset company to develop a pattern that would give the illusion of having that sort of shape, but wasn't going to constrict the actor to the point where they were, not going to be able to breathe or whatever. And it's really important when you do shows like this with costumes to be able to give rehearsal costumes. So we made sure that those corsets were ready as soon as rehearsals started, so that the women had skirts and corsets to wear in rehearsal, so they would get used to the way that they moved in them, their mannerisms, how they would sit and stand, because it's really much different from modern clothing. And so it's really important to give those actors that leg up.
Okay, so now I understand that your job is super double hard. So you have to read a play and a book probably about that play, and then you have to start drawing pictures of it while making rehearsal costumes, which is a fake halfway version of a costume you will ultimately make, which somebody will sit next to on stage and be like, this doesn't look like the movie. Did I nail it? Is that pretty close to right?
And hopefully you have people to help you do that.
and you have to manage a staff of people to help you do that. All right, well, she's busy doing that. What are you doing, Mary?
I am just kicking back. Yeah, I'm not doing.
We've got a video actually of part of your process. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about what we're about to see?
We're going to do the graining. One of the things about this period, it's overall it's the Tudor period, but it's specifically the Elizabethan period because this is the reign of Queen Elizabeth, and she was a Tudor, and she was the last of the Tudor reign. So one of the major design elements that in the Tudor era, it was called half timbering, which is, and you've seen it even to this day, where you see the framework in big timbers. But we can't get those big timbers, so I needed to recreate how to make those timbers, and I have a technique that should be on this video.
Yeah, let's see it.
That texture.
Now I'm assuming this is you giving the exact same description you just gave to me.
Let me talk it through since I don't know if we're getting audio. What I'm holding up now is called roof patch. It's a substance that's actually used for roofs, but I always love to find products that are used for something else and use them for the theater. And the great thing about this is it's water soluble. You can brush it on. It's very thick, and you can create texture with it. It really works well for a lot of textural things, but it does get a little messy, so you can see I'm wearing gloves. So first thing I'm going to do is lay it onto this piece of board to show you how to create this wood texture. It's a great texture. It's fairly, I've done this for a long time, but it's a fairly quick texture to do. So it doesn't take a whole lot of time. If I would keep moving, there I go. So you just lay it on in the direction that the grain is going to go. And I like to try to do this separately from the finished piece of scenery. It's not always possible because you can see it gets a little on the messy side. But you can do it on the whole piece because then you have to do a lot of masking off, and it's a pain. But yeah, so you just lay on this elastomeric coating, which I wish I would finish doing. There I go. I'm almost done. So this gives you the base for it. Now, you notice that the board is black. Normally, I would not paint the board before, but I just did it for this demo just to be able to see it. Normally, this would go straight on. What's nice about it is I can do this on plywood, paneling, masonite, and it all comes out the same effect. So if I have multiple different materials that I'm working with, this technique will make them all look the same.
And talk through just a little bit, describe exactly what the effect is that you're achieving.
Is a very textured wood grain, like an old beam kind of look. And what I'm showing you now, this is called a wallpaper brush because it's nice and stiff. And that's going to create the grain of the wood.
So you're taking a piece of, and what's the board that you started with? Is it's a flat?
Yeah, it's just a piece of Luan,
Like
but
a
I
flat
could do
Luan. Yeah.
pretty much anything. But what I'm going to do now is create the grain. And I could do just a straight grain, but I usually try to put a knot in it because it makes it more interesting and more detailed.
And a little bit more realistic. Listen, I'm thinking about this for all of our DIY Instagrammers who are like, oh, I can't afford this background, but I can.
Exactly.
This is an excellent technique. This is an amazing theatrical illusion.
Yeah. So I've made one side, leaving a room for the knots, and then I'll do the other side. And basically, I just want kind of the, oblong hourglass shape. And you can kind of see how it's starting to look like wood. And then I'm going to take an old paintbrush, artist paintbrush that has seen much better days. Do a little cleanup, and then I'll fill in the knots themselves.
And let me just say, when I filmed this and Gary was doing it, was demonstrating it, it was fascinating to me. I'd never seen anything. So.
It's one of those things I don't know how that many people do, but because I like playing with different materials and different things, I love going through Ace and Lowe's and finding new stuff. It's like, oh, that sounds interesting.
It's really brilliant, Gary. This is like using artistic techniques and some like basic ingenieur techniques to really create this period-specific wood at a reasonable price inside the budget, but also like achieving you're not trying to build the real thing; you're trying to make it look like that. Amazing. Yeah. Anybody interested?
We were dealing with 6x6 beams, which we no way could afford or lift. Right. So
anybody interested in the technique, and there are a couple of others along those same lines. You can see them on our YouTube channel at Nashville Repertory Theatre. And I just want to say, I know we're having some technical difficulties. We literally just watched a YouTube video for a minute. I just wanted to thank Matt, who's working with Community Arts at Bellevue, for helping us on the technical side of this. I genuinely appreciate it. What I really want to know, Gary, is we're spending that's pretty fast comparatively. I know that so much of the design work you do is uses a lot of time, uses a lot of effort, right? There's really small, intricate, and extraordinary design. So I want to know about design challenges, right? You're okay, well, I will invent a way to do period design. I'll invent the grain. But in a show like Shakespeare in Love, there's a big show with a lot of people. What are the design challenges that you come up against, and what are the creative workarounds?
Well, for me, one of the biggest problems is the show was basically written to be on a proscenium stage, and we were putting it on a thrust stage where we have audience on three sides, which means you can't hide anything, and everything can be a blockage for sight lines. So one of the big problems that I came up with, and it was very specific in the script, was the bed for Viola and for Shakespeare. Beds of that period were really massive. They were huge, huge pieces of furniture. And the script says that both Viola and Shakespeare have to get in the bed, close the curtains around it, and they can't be seen. Now, in Johnson Theater, where this took place, I had 4 feet of space to bring anything onto the stage. So to make the bed big enough, the bed was actually made in 2 pieces that had to be put together right behind a curtain on stage before it came on. It was the only way we could actually get a sizable piece on stage. And then when it went off, it had to be taken back apart to be stored.
And so this is about the backstage area versus on-stage area, that you had enough room on stage for a giant bed, but not enough
space backstage.
And so it literally had to suddenly be built Transformer style, and then as soon as the love scene was over, broken apart.
Broken apart.
So that does sound like a big challenge. That doesn't sound easy at all.
Well, and part of the bed was actually the funeral bier for the Romeo and Juliet scene. So the top section, the mattress and the upper canopy had to come off and be put on a shelf so the bottom could roll up on its own. So it actually became
so this is something I think people don't. So earlier, Kathleen asked, how do you repurpose stuff? You know, like after the show's over. I don't think people realize how much you repurpose while the show is happening. So again, this is like a these are all built at the same level of design that we just saw in the YouTube video with the wood grain. Like each one of these pieces is not just, you know, like hammered together black wood. I mean, this is like really like intricately designed to be able to be broken apart and reconfigured into separate pieces. So that does sound like a huge challenge. Okay, well, while he's doing that, what are you doing? Like all you had to do was like zip stuff up, right? Like what are the big design challenges for a costume designer? Is it the same sort of issue? I mean, does it like by the time you get to the space, is it practical issues that become the hardest workarounds?
Yes, and that lack of backstage space can be a problem for us as well, because in this show we had quick changes that had to happen very, very fast, you know, off stage, back on stage. So we have
a quick change, just again, I don't mean to interrupt, but like for those people that don't totally understand, a quick change is when a person goes from one entire costume to another entire costume in the length it takes for a blackout and the scene to change and then the lights right back up, right? This is 2 minutes maybe in time.
Yeah. And if you remember that picture we saw before with the dress on one side and the little capped person, that was the biggest fast change because Viola had to go from being a boy back to being a lady. And so that was a huge change. So not only do we need room backstage for our technicians, our wardrobe people, to be able to facilitate those changes because we don't make the actors do them themselves. We also have to take that into consideration when we're building the costumes to make sure that fasteners can be taken apart or put back together very quickly, and that they're going to hold while they're wearing them on stage. And
so this is a full Elizabethan style costume quick change off stage because the play, although set in Elizabethan times, is actually a quite modern play. So they have to change everything. This is wig, this is costume, this is all of it. And so your job is to not only design the costume the way it would look in an Elizabethan way, but also make it practical so that it can come apart really easily with Velcro and snaps, and then hire the individuals who are responsible for doing it, all while making sure the actor doesn't, you know, accidentally tear it apart while they're freaking out and trying to make their entrance. Okay, that's
a really good description.
Yeah. It's so easy.
That's actually, it's really, I think those are the types of things that we frequently don't think or talk about, right? Like part of our job is a little bit like magicians. We definitely want you to see the end result, and we definitely want you to see the setup, but we don't want to see we don't want you to see us working at it, right? And even though we do sometimes these like background things or maybe a video about wood technique, we don't often think about the way that all those things fit together. They're not supposed to show off. They're supposed to support the rest of the work. And so I'm delighted to get like a second just kind of like talk about the sort of practical problems that go along with needing to do a quick change, even though you're wearing a giant Elizabethan dress. So with all the problems and all the design elements and going, you know, like from, you know, someone naming, you know, saying out loud that we're going to do the show Shakespeare in Love to the research and all that, this is a slow arc putting all the pieces together. So Lori, what's the moment when it feels like, you know, there it is, that's the show, it's come together?
I have to say that probably it's the last dress rehearsal before we have opening night. Because
and this is like this is the it's a full run of the show in full costume. It's like everything. It's just like an opening night, except there's no audience there,
right?
Or a small audience sometimes.
Right, and usually we have 3 dress rehearsals before opening night or before previews. Sometimes we'll have previews before opening night, but I think that's when it all comes together for me because if I and my crew have done our jobs correctly, everything should be set by then. Everything should be done. All of the problems with the changes, all of the the tracks that different wardrobe people are running, and in other words, who they're changing when and where that's happening. All of that should have come together by now. Any changes that maybe the director wanted, more bling on the queen or something, So all of these things should be done by that point where we can just kind of sit back, because during all the other rehearsals, we're furiously taking notes, right? We're keeping up with things that haven't gone correctly, or what we need to change, or we need to make sure this hem is shorter, or whatever. And so by the last dress, it is my hope, and usually the reality, that I can kind of sit back and see how we've solved all those problems and be satisfied that it looks good, it's working for the actors, and the audience is going to be pleased. One of the best pieces of advice I ever got about costume is that if people don't really notice your costumes, you're probably doing a really good job, because really they should fit into the world of the play so nicely that people don't really, pick them out for different things. I would probably say that's not true with the queen, though, because she was pretty fabulous.
Yeah, you kind of want everybody to shout, "Oh, that dress!" Yeah, sure, that's the moment, right? And what about you, Gary? What's the again, like the project, it's so long, right? From imagining it to building it to working with the team that helps you put it together. And obviously it's not just you, there's a construction crew and props team. And what's the moment that it really starts to breathe for you, where it really starts to come alive and be like, okay, this is the show we're going to see?
Well, I would have to say it's when an audience is there, because really
bringing the audience in is the moment where you start to feel like it's alive.
Until that point, I don't know if I'm successful unless I know I've touched the audience. So when the audience sees it and responds to it, tells me if I was successful or not. Until that point, I can be very happy with it, and it really just bombed. And the audience is like, yeah, not so much there, dude. But yeah, it really is. It's. I'm hoping to bring the magic of theater to the audience. So to see that is when I feel like I've been a success.
Yeah, I totally hear that, and that's the thing that right now, I'm so excited to be doing the stuff that we're doing, the educational videos that we're doing, some of the production stuff. If the queen is Jennifer Wickham-Oliva, of course she's gonna be fabulous. Yes, it's true.
That costume had to rise to her level.
That's right.
Yeah, you gotta keep level. I miss being able to do those things in front of an audience because of the way that audience is such a part of the production. I mean, like, it truly is. It's not just different every night; it's alive in a different way every single night. And I know we miss that. And I know the Nashville Rep theater family of artists misses that, but also our audiences miss that too. And I can't wait to be able to sit in the dark alone together, once again. We've come to the end of our time. I can't believe that we've already talked for as long as we have. But thank you both for being so honest and open about your process. Thank you again to Matt for all the technical help, and Kathleen for giving us this awesome opportunity to talk to her audience a little bit. If you are interested in some of those videos that we talked about, or any of the stuff that Nashville Rep is continuing to do through the end of the year and into next year, you can, there it is. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at NashRep, or you can find us at Nashville Repertory Theatre on YouTube and Facebook, or Nashville Repertory Theatre.org on the internet. Again, thank you so much to Community Arts in Bellevue for having us. Thank you, Gary. Thank you, Lori. It's been nice to spend
it was awesome. Thank you, Nate.
Yeah. Thank you all so much. We hope to see you back in the theater again soon.
Absolutely.
I hope so.